I'm Alan Ryder. I'm a musician and a writer from Coventry, England. And back in 1980, I produced this post-punk fanzine, Adventures in Reality. I did 12 issues of this between 1980 and 1984. And this is the story of Adventures in Reality. So for those of you not familiar with the geography of the United Kingdom, Coventry is here. It's a town population of about 350,000 back in 1980. It's around about 110 miles from London, so that's 170 kilometres, and it had quite an industrial base to it, so car manufacturing, that kind of stuff, and also, of course, it was attacked during the Second World War and quite comprehensively bombed. This may look a bit like a bomb site, but actually in 1980 there was a very big recession going on in the UK at the time. We had a Conservative government under Margaret Thatcher. There was a lot of social strife and conflict going on. It was quite a tough time. I took this photo in 1980. This is coming into the train station in Coventry. The rather optimistic sign there, perhaps from a previous time, Coventry City of Skills and Opportunities, set in a landscape that is anything but, as you can see, it's a very down at heel, derelict looking place, and that's what greeted you as you came into the town centre. Coventry was, as I said, it was bombed quite comprehensively during the war, so that kind of cleared the way for city planners to come in and construct what really was a kind of a very modern lay fort, but actually quite a bleak landscape by the time we got to 1980s. So by the time I'd finished doing it, this is the city centre. You can see there's tower blocks, there's kind of brutalist architecture, a lot of subways, and it was a bit of a concrete jungle, as was attested to by this band, the Specials, and their two-tone record label, which is probably the most famous export musically from Coventry that we have. And if you listen to that first Specials album, that will give you a pretty good flavour of what life in Coventry was like at the time. There was, however, not just ska going on in Coventry in 1979, 1980. There was a lot of other bands. A vibrant live scene was going. These are photos from the time. This band here, God's Toys, was a popular live band. There was others as well, quite a variety. So anything from, on the right here, Criminal Class, who were like a skinhead band. On the left, you've got punk band, and in the middle there, you've got more avant-garde band. That's a band called Alice in Gaza, playing lots of local venues, and also outdoor festivals as well. So this is one that was held at the time. This is a punk band called Squad, who were playing at a festival that was held on one of the commons in Coventry. Small pub venues also you had. This is another local band, a very popular band at the time, playing in a little pub called the Zodiac. I used to regularly go to this. It was a very small place, little stage at the end of one room, basically, with a bar down one side. But there was a lot of those small pub venues, bands playing almost every night back in 1979, 1980. The kind of venues, as you can see, were very basic. And if you look at the audience, a little bit morose, perhaps. So not really your glamorous kind of club venues that you tend to get more now. These were just halls and school halls even that were just pressed into use, often for very short periods of time, maybe a few months they'd run and then it'd move on to somewhere else, or they were like function rooms at the back of pubs and even hotels. As we can see, this one here is a place called the Matrix Hall. This is a punk festival, sparsely attended, and as you can see, by 1979 you'd expect the kind of punk look to have spread out from London. A spiky haired Sid Vicious kind of clone look, but it hadn't really. This was typical of the English regions kind of style of dress, I guess. People did not have a lot of money. Uh, People were not wearing your leather jackets and your punky clothes outside of the capital so much, really. And gigs were quite sparsely attended. And as you can see, that people were not always, kind of wildly enthusiastic about it. It's easy to look back now and say everything was like great, everybody was packing these things out, but they weren't necessarily. Nightclubs like this one here in Coventry also put on gigs. Um, there was some good gigs here, but it had a bit of a rough reputation otherwise. And this place here, Locarno, was also a big venue in Coventry. The Clash, Stiff Little Fingers, the Specials, lots of other bands came and played there. Even Chuck Berry played there. It's now a library, so quite a contrast really to what it was then. It was a much noisier place back then. And as you can see, the kind of architecture that we've got in Coventry, just to set the context. Lots of venues like this. This one's in a satellite town, Nuneaton, oldie worldy pub, but there's a back room there where they used to put on gigs regularly every weekend, really. This is a nice old Victorian pub where a lot of bands used to play. U2 played here. A lot of other bands used to play as well in the early days in their career. In the little back room that's down there on the right. And other venues like the Hope and Anchor, which is not the same one as is in London. It's a bit more famous. And also you've had record shops and this Wedge Cafe, which you'll see there on the left, is a left-wing bookshop and cafe that used to sell fanzines and was quite an important meeting place. Virgin Records, when they had a record shop chain, rather than just being an airline now, up there in the top in the middle had a series of record shops. It used to be a focal point as well, certainly in Coventry, and they did put on some little small in-store gigs as well. And then there's another pub, the Dog and Trumpet, there that had a lot of ska bands played there as well. And this is where Adventures in Reality started. So back in 1980, towards the end of 1980, I started running my own fanzine from this little terraced house in Coventry, from my bedroom upstairs and the back room where there was a large dining room table that I used to use to cut out and lay out my fanzine. And it started off in a very small way, really. This is me at that particular time. In one of those venues with a few other fanzine editors, all four of us there in a line, lined up, kind of, as you can see, not particularly punky clothing necessarily, but just doing what we could really to try and help and contribute to the scene. This is the first issue of Adventures in Reality. This was A5 size, which in English sizes is kind of relatively small, really. It's still readable, but it's small, but it's obviously cheaper to produce that way because you can fold the page in half and get twice as many pages out of it, but it is smaller. One of the things that Adventures in Reality became known for, perhaps more since as well, since it's had a little bit of a kind of a reputation in the intervening years, was for the fact that it was more of a image-driven and arty to a certain extent. It didn't include, for most of the early issues, anything about what was inside on the cover. Post-punk fanzines and punk fanzines usually had a list of bands on the cover, maybe a photo of the bands. I didn't do that right from the start. This is a futurist architecture picture from the early 1900s, and on the back there's a collage, which is a John Hartfield collage just taken out of an art book, that's put there. In fact, that's not the back, that's like an advert. I stuck up a little poster which I would stick up locally. It just said New Coventry fanzine available at a very cheap price as well. Also numbering, rather than 1, 2, 3, it was alphabetical ABC. So I really think I'd run out of letters and get to the end of the alphabet. So that wasn't really a concern for me. So that was issue A, 1980, swiftly followed by issue B and C. So issue B, and in the archive, which you can which is available. You can get all of the inside pages of all of these, and also there is a booklet I produced which actually reproduces all of those, which is available in the library, and also you can buy it from various places, including myself. So issue B, the cover is just a collage of things that Horace, who's a bass player with the Specials, basically gave to me. You can see there's a receipt there for damage on one of their tools, monitors broken, rolls of gaffer tape, that kind of thing. £1,458 and 54 pence they got charged for things that were damaged, and lots of receipts, backstage passes, that kind of thing. I just collaged them all together and just photocopied that for the front sleeve. At this time, I didn't have a typewriter, so a lot of these were handwritten inside. It was only by issue C, again, as you can see there, no indication of what's inside it on the cover, just a wartime picture of I think a French soldier surrendering to the Germans in the Battle of France. But inside it was kind of handwritten, really, and just stapled together, photocopied locally. The pricing here, you see 16 pence is a rather odd price to have. That was because at the time I felt that you shouldn't make any profit at all out of doing a fanzine. You did it for the love of it, so I'd charge exactly what it cost to produce it, which was 16 pence, which is why it's handwritten in there. That was not perhaps the smartest move, because it meant I had no leeway then for getting the money back in for the next issue unless I'd sold every single one of them, which of course you never did. You ended up giving a few away, or you didn't sell all of them by the time you were doing the next one. So I had to fairly swiftly just put the price up to a more realistic 30 pence, which was a standard kind of price for fanzines at the time in the UK. I did posters as well, again, which didn't feature what was inside the fanzine and didn't actually feature the front cover of the fanzine. So they would be either little cartoony collages like this one with Star Trek, Captain Kirk and Spock on it, or they would be photo montages that I would produce myself, like this one here, made out of several different images, which I would create, and then I would put those up in local shops and places that it was sold to tell people that it was on sale in the shop. But again, no indication of what they would find inside. This one here, issue D. By issue D, I started to actually challenge the poor old reader a little bit more by putting them inside of this one came inside a plastic bag. Again, a photo montage on the front, no indication of what's inside. The bag was sealed up, no contents list. You just had to buy it, open up the bag. It's partially destroyed the cover of the fanzine, really, by ripping the bag. And then you found out what you had inside it. And what was inside it was this. So just a selection of loose leaf bits and bobs, really. So there was some reviews and articles, but there was also pictures, images, stickers. Sometimes I used to put in singles that I would get sent to review, so I'd review them and then I would just pop them inside, so you might get a free single, badges, that kind of thing. But also things like toffees and tea bags, things like that. Right from the second issue, I stapled a tea bag to the inside of the front cover, so you could have a cup of tea, which wouldn't have been very practical because the staple made a big hole in the tea bag, so it would have all leaked out. But used to include lots of free gifts and became known locally for doing that. And the coverage at this time was local to the Coventry scene, which was a variety of post-punk bands of all different flavours that you saw at the start of this presentation. By the time we got to issue E, so this would probably have been about, getting off a year in, it really started to get much more experimental. So this one here was a plain brown paper bag issue. The reason for that was because I wanted to produce a version that just had not even a title on the front of it. It was just a picture on the cover, and that picture was a piece of body art which featured it was nude body art. So that was deliberately kind of confrontational to do that. But what it meant was that none of the record shops said that they felt they could stock it, and certainly none of the left-wing bookshops wanted to stock it either, because they didn't agree with that kind of nudity or anything like that. So that left me with a bit of a problem. I couldn't actually sell it anywhere, and I just went physically sold them all myself. So I decided that what I would do was I would put it inside a brown paper bag, which when you used to buy allegedly pornography, they used to put it inside a plain brown wrapper, plain bag, so that people couldn't see what it was. So I thought, okay, we'll have a play on that, and we'll have a bag, but we'll actually print a design on that bag. And I made some screen prints in the local art college, two color printing, which means you've got to do it twice, and started to bought a load of brown paper bags from a wholesaler, and proceeded to start to print them, which did create a huge problem, because when you screen print things, they have to be held onto the table by a kind of vacuum pump that's underneath it. But if you did that with a paper bag, it would just stick to the screen because it's got two sides to it, and it would just rip. So you had to turn that off and then print it, and then very carefully peel them off. And if you didn't peel them off really carefully, they would smudge. So I only got really about one out of every two that was a decent enough print. And then I had to do it all again to get the other colour. So that was basically one in four, probably, really, realistically. So doing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these things took a very long time. So it took 2 nights. I went in and did it overnight, sort of dusk till dawn, and it just took a long time, and it was very tiring process. But it looked good, and again, it was all sealed up, so people had to buy it, and they did buy it, which was a good thing, really. This was what you got inside it. So there is your nude body art. That was intended to be the original front cover, and there is the paper bag that it went into. So I still managed to give people a bit of a surprise when they opened the bag and they pulled it out. So my intention was actually fulfilled perfectly well by this. But also, it became a little bit of a minor design classic, and it's featured in books on fanzine and punk design since. There's just a few more examples of what was inside it. You can see a kind of local campaigns and gig reviews, that kind of thing. Now we went on to issue F. So you had like a little badge stuck to the front of it. Again, just a picture of a Buddha kind of self-immolating in Saigon, I believe at the time, as a protest against the Vietnam War there. But again, there's no real kind of, even in name Adventures in Reality is quite small there, just typed in between the lines, and there's no indication of who's inside it. And this is what you had inside it: Ganga 4, feature layer, and other things as well, including Alice and Gaza. Here's a few more pages from it. as you can see, punk bands, vinyl reviews, things like that. Fairly kind of uh, anarchic kind of layout as well, really. Still using quite a bit of handwriting in there as well, and bits of cartoons and things stuck out, other people writing for me. Issue G, again, was in a clear plastic bag, but this was a fold-out thing. So this cover here, actually, these photos that I took locally in Coventry, you can see, again, the concrete architecture. This kind of folded out, and the fanzine was inside, but it had an essay on urban life, with a few more photos inside it. So it was trying to push the boundaries a little bit of what a fanzine should be, because punk fanzines were of a look. They tended to look quite similar. They had that kind of cut and paste, uh, ransom note lettering type of stuff, or stenciled. They were often printed by a few printers in London, so they had a very similar look to them, and they had the bands on the front. Often the same bands were featured in a number of different fanzines. I never wanted to look like everybody else, so I always tried to do something different, to both the other fanzines locally and also to national and even international fanzines. At this point, we started to sell and distribute a lot more internationally outside of Coventry. This one here probably is the one that I think is a very interesting one, actually. So on the left there, you've got the actual fanzine itself, and on the right is a poster for it. The posters, again, never featured the actual sleeve. They just said, go and buy it. But this one was actually a compilation edition with another fanzine. Collaborations were quite common. The joint issues would be produced where two fanzine editors would get together and they would effectively share a magazine and split it between them. And it was a way of making it a bit cheaper, I guess, but also a way of having a bit of variety. But rather than do a single magazine with like two halves to it, I decided that the best thing to do was to have two separate magazines, half-size magazines, and put them into this folder, which described a little bit about the magazine and even had our fingerprints on the back of it, of each of the editors. So yeah, I mean that was an interesting thing. I think went down quite well. Issue I, by this point, it was starting to get distributed a lot more widely. So, and as you can see, there was Swiss and Italian, Los Angeles. So there was features on international scenes, and it was much more internationally distributed by Rough Trade. Did my distribution for me. So at that point, I thought it probably need to actually put what's in it to help it to sell a little bit better. So I started to reluctantly put something on the sleeve that said what was inside it. And there's an inside page there on the right, so you can see the kind of things. So there's a mixture of like a diary entry there, some semi-political stuff, and also scene reports, interviews, those kinds of things. This one here probably was the one that sold the most, I would say. I had a flexi disc with this one. That was quite common. A lot of fanzines, both here and also in other countries, used to do flexi discs. So I did one as well. Had to hike the price up a little bit to cover the cost of it. And again, this kind of hand-done childish handwriting font rather than using typesetting was good. And there's on the right there is the editorial. You'll see that I actually signed each one as well. So I used to go through and sign them all. It took a little while to do. Just kind of thing that people didn't do. So I thought I would do that. So this one here sold quite well, and it's probably the one that cover is probably featured more in other publications about fanzines. That's the flexidisc itself by a band called Trish, who are still going. This was their first kind of release, I guess. It wasn't on a cassette. Um, they're still going strong now, of course. And this one here is this release has got the kind of legendary status, although flexi discs are not fantastic quality. They're a bit crackly and not great, but they're very cheap to do. We're getting to the end of the kind of run now, really. So we're kind of working up to 1984. So issue K was the last of the kind of full magazine type issues. This image on the front here was actually done by a housemate of mine, a guy called Colin, who just scribbled that over breakfast just on a piece of paper, and I just thought it was good, so I kind of scooped it up, kept hold of it, and then used it for the sleeve. Used to do quite a lot of just grabbing hold of things that were lying around, or even scooping things off the street, that had been discarded, and using those bits of artwork. They could be quite good for that, and again, that made it look a little bit different. The last kind of issue, I guess, was issue L, which was called The Last Supper. So it was a compilation cassette and magazine. So at that point, I'd been doing a label with cassettes for a little while, and getting more into the kind of industrial music side of it. So which was more like Throbbing Gristle and Test Department, those industrial bands, early industrial bands, very different to what we now know as industrial, which is much more guitar based. These weren't guitar based really, they were kind of percussion, synthesizers, noise, that kind of thing. But again, they had a big underground kind of cult following. The cover to this is done by a guy called Daniel Selk, who ran the Church of the Subgenius, who, if you look it up, you'll see, you might be familiar with, that as a kind of a spoof church. But he did his cover for me, which is called The Dead Mourning the Living. And The Last Supper, which is here, was a C70 cassette with some unreleased tracks on it, and it had like a booklet in it as well, and also a early computer program. So ZX Spectrum was a very early computer program in there, which you could load up if you had one, because they loaded the programs off cassettes in those days, and that would give you a catalogue really of the different releases that were available on the label. So this was number 7 on the label, so it would give you the rest of them as well. So that's kind of again, innovative use of the media for this. And these, I sold an awful lot of these. These were distributed worldwide. I sold almost 2,000 of them, so which is a lot for a cassette then and now. Of course, now cassettes are still around, but they're in very limited quantities, less than 100, most of them. So that would have been it, apart from in 2012, the band that I was in, because I was also doing music at the same time as well, was called Stress, and a reissue came out on an American label called Dark Entries, a compilation reissue. So I thought I would do a special edition, Resurrect Adventures in Reality, just to cover Stress, because I didn't really cover my own band at all, hardly, when I was doing the fanzine. I don't know why, I just didn't think I should be blowing my own trumpet in that way. So I designed a couple of sleeves for it. This one here that's on the left with the kind of skeleton on it, I always wanted to use. I didn't end up using that. I went for one that just had an image of us from a band photo reversed out on it. But I did hang on to that other image for later use, which we'll see in a little bit. So Stress Special Edition, again, I tried to produce it very much like I used to do back in the 80s, even though it was in 2012. So lots of cut and paste style, kind of jumbly in a way, I guess, but it was much more like the original stuff. So using kind of typewritten text and sticking things on little arrows, things like that. Strong touch of humour in there as well. Aside from Adventures in Reality at the time, I also did some spin-off fanzines. So these ones were actually tiny little fanzines, really, half the size of the smallest fanzine that I started out doing. But they were spoof ones and done anonymously. Nobody knew it was me doing these. And I would just charge a very low amount for them. And I just put them out in one or two stores. There's this one, negative response and certain substances. Again, probably a bit of a clue in the fact that it just had the title on the front and nothing to indication of what was inside, but it was a kind of joke, spoof, cartoons, those kind of things. So this one here was the third one. There was three in all. Sticky Fingers. That's a cover on the left there. And on the right, you can see a couple of pages from it, about how to do a fanzine, how to be in a rock and roll band, stuff like that. So again, it's just a bit of a joke, really. In parallel with doing Adventures in Reality, I also did a more political magazine, fanzine, which was with some other people as well, called Not the Job Hunter. The Job Hunter being a local council magazine for job hunters, because of high unemployment at the time, and we felt it was bland propaganda, so we'd do something that was opposite. So we produced this, which was actually in 1982, which was given away free. So not surprisingly, we managed to get rid of quite a few of them. We got a grant to do this. Actually, Queen's Silver Jubilee Trust Fund gave us a grant to do it, which caused a bit of a stir because it was very anti-government, and the media went absolutely mad when they found out about this, and we got a lot of publicity on the back of that, including the national radio and television came along to do features on us. As you can see, International Broadcasting Trust, they did a big documentary on us. They were very taken by my dog, Bog, actually, who's there on the right. So they came along and filmed a whole program on us at the time. So yeah, that was great fun to do. As I said, just to kind of bring you up to speed with what else was happening around Adventures in Reality and where it went to. I was in a two-piece band, Stress, with another guy that produced another local fanzine, actually. So this is kind of fanzine editors band, an electronic band, and we did a few albums and played a few gigs at the time before we split up, as you do. Here's a few more photos. As you can see, homemade shirt there. Lots of different hairstyles, but again, we didn't have a lot of money, so you can see sometimes we went to gigs, we were just carrying our equipment rather than even a van. We just carry it, get on the bus sometimes, and take it down there and do stuff. So it was all very homegrown kind of stuff that we did. Here's some more photos of the kind of recording setup that we had. As you can see, pretty basic, just in a little flat, couple of synthesizers and a guitar there. And I used to also play with a local band electrician who I put the flex disc out by just for a little bit and help them out. Did some slides and visuals for them mainly as well. There's a photo of me at a local venue in Coventry playing with them. It's from the local paper. Since then, more recently, I've actually written about a lot of this stuff in a couple of large format books. So there's that picture of this skeleton and a rhinoceros, very unusual picture, which is actually the cover of a complete reprint collection. So this is a large format, thick and quite a hefty book, which has actually got everything reprinted, including all of those spin-off magazines, posters, stickers, everything, and interviews and stuff about techniques, about how we produce that. You can buy this book. It's not very much, actually, a very reasonable price. And I think it's also available in university libraries as well. And the one that follows that up, Tales from the Ghost Town, is about the rest of the Coventry book fanzines, because there's about 40 of them, which was No, in fact, there's more like 50 of them actually featured in this book, but there might be a few more that I didn't quite manage to track down. This is a lot for one small town, really. In a that kind of period, you're talking about 5 or 6 years. So they're all collected together in this and reviewed and reproduced the covers of them, and some interviews with the people that actually produce them as well. So if you're interested in fanzines in the UK at that time, this is a good book to get. And here's me kind of reading through the Adventures in Reality book, so you can see it's quite a chunky book to get, but it's all in there, full colour, which is good. Also, since then I've remained active, doing both reissues of the original material by my band Stress, also Mummies and Madmen, which is another band, and Dance Naked, which came afterwards. They were always coming out on CD, vinyl, and all formats. And then Sinestra is my current electronic act, which has just had a release come out last year, and working on the second album now. So still doing that, and also I am still writing. So I write for a arts and culture website called Outside Left. I've done lots of stuff for them. Here's just a small selection of it, interviewing various people, including from The Cure, Specials, Boy Harsher, and reviewing things as well, like from records and books, things like that. So I'm still doing it, still writing. Haven't finished yet. So, but starting doing a fanzine, I think, kind of sets you up for life. And people I've spoken to that have done fanzines themselves, usually they end up continuing to do something artistic and creative. So I do think it has a definite influence on you.
And that is the story of Adventures in Reality.